Hey everybody, Movie Reviewer Next Door here, and I'm back with. Sorry. I'm back with the Bond series, and I am now at The Living Daylights. This film is from 1987, directed by John Glenn, and it stars Timothy Dalton, Mariam Dabo, Jurin Krub, I think that's how you say it, Jodan Baker, John Rhys Davies, Art Malik, and Thomas Wheatley. Now, in this film, James Bond helps a Russian general escape into the West. He soon finds out that the KGB wants to kill him for helping the general. A little while later, the general is kidnapped from the Secret Service, leading 007 to be suspicious. That's about the plot of the first half, but what do I think of this film? This one I've always been a bit meh on. Like half and half. Again, kind of like Octopussy. I go back and forth from thinking it's good and decent. This time I landed on decent, like I did with Octopussy. I think my main issue here is that the first half is so damn good. Like, it's like, if the first and second halves were of the same caliber, this would be a 9. Easy. But it still wouldn't be perfect because these villains aren't much. And I think the main issue is that quite a few of the films of this time had to have a secondary villain. And I'm like, if they just focused all of this film into one villain, I think it would have done wonders. Because here's the thing. I can't think of his name. Jurin Krabbe and Jodan Baker are both great actors. I love Jodan Baker. I've loved him ever since Walking Tall. I like him even more in the Bond films he's in, which I'm pretty sure GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. I remember really liking him in those too. So here I think it's just a matter of his character isn't much. But yeah, let me get to the cast. Timothy Dalton is James Bond. This is his first film as Bond, and I think he does a great job. I do. I think he knows just the right amount of seriousness and, lightheartedness to bring to the role, just like Roger Moore did with For Your Eyes Only. And I do think he does a great job here. He definitely shows that he's fine with doing some of the stunts. In the opening scene, he's like holding on to the Jeep. I really like that scene. I think it's nice for these first Bond films for these Bond films that have like an opening action scene. I really like that. I like that it shows like, okay, this guy is Bond. He can be with the best of them. And I do like this film's opening sequence, the whole like training mission getting compromised. I love that. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I think Timothy Dalton was a great choice. Apparently around the same time they were thinking Sam Neill and also Pierce Brosnan, which Pierce Brosnan couldn't do it because he couldn't get out of his Remington Steele contract at the time, and then about the time I think the film came out, the show got canceled unexpectedly, so basically he was out of the job up until GoldenEye, so 8 years of not being able to do much of anything, so that sucks for him. I'll say I feel bad for that dude. He became like my second favorite Bond, so not that big of a deal, but yeah. Mariam Dabo, she's okay as Cara Malovi. I do wish they made her more of a, I hate to say it like this because I don't want to sound like, sorry, it's a bit hot in here. I don't want to sound like a feminist or anything because I'm really not third wave feminist. I guess I'm technically like 50s feminist where it's like equal instead of women are better than men, that kind of thing. I want equal. But I do wish she was more like the character was supposed to be in the short story, which in the opening scene, or the opening scene after the credits, with Bond like sniping and hitting her rifle, I think that would have worked better if she was actually like an assassin like she was in the short story, but instead it's like, oh, she's being used as a patsy basically. But yeah, she's not one of my favorite Bond girls. She really isn't. Joran Krabbe as Georgy Koskov, the general that we're supposed to think is a good guy from the first half. I don't like when these films do this, where they make you think that the bad guy is a good guy for most of it, and then like halfway through they change. I feel like it gives you less time to get to understand them as people or as villains. He does a decent job. He's not on screen enough to really, make an impact. Jodan Baker as Brad Whitaker. I like him. I like him as an actor. I think his character could have been interesting. This like guy, stolen valor, wearing outfits for wars that he wasn't in or armies that he wasn't in, recreating battles, having all these like figures in his house. I think there's a nice setup here for a villain. The execution really isn't there because he's a very hollow character. But I do still love Jodan Baker. John Rhys Davies as Leonid Pushkin. I like him. Again, not a lot to his character. Art Malik as Cameron Shaw. He's fine. He works. Andreas Wisniewski as Necros. I think he's a dancer turned actor. He works. He's menacing enough. And Thomas Wheatley as Saunders. He actually got a bit on my nerves. He's like helping Bond kinda throughout the film, and he's just kind of there to be like extra motivation for Bond to kill, or to arrest or kill either of the villains. So, the opening title sequence, I do think the Timothy Dalton films have some of the weakest opening title sequences of the entire series, because they feel like something's missing. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you got beautiful women, you got naked women, you got the like projections, you've got the rotoscoping glasses to show like Bond and a woman in both lenses, but it just kind of feels rushed. Because even a View to a Kill, I don't even love the View to a Kill opening sequence, but it was more colorful. It was using more of the like black. It was like the black darkness and then the neon paint, like glow in the dark paint lighting up. There was something there, and I remember the License to Kill one being pretty bad as well. I think it was worse than this one. I do like the song Living Daylights by a-ha, who did Take On Me. I do like the song though. But yeah, this film, I know there are a lot of people, especially on Letterboxd, that are like, it grows on them. I don't think this one grows on me. Because, yeah, if you go into this film and just watch, like, the action scenes, it'd be pretty high just for the action. But I'm not a fan of action movies that spread it out. Unless it's, like, one of those movies where it's like, okay, you get little tiny action beats, and then the grand finale is, like, 15 minutes of like really damn good action. Then that can work. Where like a film like The Rhythm Section from 2020, that film doesn't have any like spectacular action, but it had an interesting story. It had an interesting character. I know a lot of people on every site have shit on that movie. I think that's a very underrated film. I think Blake Lively did a great job. I think all the actors really did great jobs. And I think it was interesting seeing a not perfect assassin, like you get like John Wick, Anna. Even though I love Anna, I do think it had a bit of the issue of John Wick, where it's just like, oh, she's perfect. Atomic Blonde, where everybody's perfect. I liked seeing this like young woman grow into being a better assassin. Like the first hit that she does, the first person she has to kill, like she almost gets killed herself. I like that. I like giving her more of a character, and as the film went on, she got better and better until she becomes like an actually really good assassin by the end. I should do longer review of Rhythm Section. That was also by the producers of that film was produced by Eon, who did the Bond films. So it's like one of the few other films that they had, and it was apparently a big bomb. I don't understand why. I loved it, but this film, with that film, it worked the little bits of action because it was more of a drama thriller than action. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. I do blame the advertising for making people think it was going to be an action film, but this film, it does have quite a bit of action, but it's like there's not really a lot of motivation for it, because again, the villains, Koskov and Whitaker, are kind of just, they're almost never a part of it, you know? It's mostly just armies that Koskov has at his disposal, and he's almost never actually fighting Bond, which is why the ending is kind of just eh. This action could work. I think John Glenn is a fantastic action director for this series, even though it's not like he goes into like kung fu or anything, but like there's some great explosions, some great car chases in his films. The hand-to-hand fight scenes aren't bad, they're just kind of eh. But in a film like For Your Eyes Only, which is like my favorite so far, the action had motivation, even though it was kind of the same thing as this, where it's like the general isn't outed as a villain until like halfway through. I still felt motivation in the action, and it really put the audience on like the, wait, who's the bad guy? Wait, you're the bad guy? I'm the bad guy? Who's the bad guy? And I really liked that. In this film, it's more, yeah, it's a bunch of bad guys shooting a Bond, and there's really no reason to it other than this guy tells them to do it. So it kind of feels hollow. The story of this film kind of goes all over the place, in a way kind of like Octopussy did, where characters just kind of find things that lead them to each other. Like, early in the film, Bond chooses not to shoot Cara Mallovi. Why? Other than, if he shot her, we wouldn't have a Bond film. He couldn't have possibly known that she had blanks in her gun. You can't see that from that far away. 2, he later says that woman wasn't a sniper, she's far too inexperienced. How do you know that from just looking at her holding a gun? Like, they never explain this, and it kind of feels like really choppy writing, to be honest. And it's not like this film was rushed. It came out within the same time span as the others after 2 years, so I don't really understand why that. People talk about plot holes, that is a plot hole. We never get it explained or insinuated at any time why that happened, and it's just kind of because if he shot her, we wouldn't have a Bond girl, and even though we have a Bond girl, she's really unremarkable. But yeah, like, there are good bits of action in the film. There's the opening sequence with Bond on the Jeep and then like parachuting out the back of it before it explodes. That was great. Great stunt work, great explosions, like really great. There's the cello case thing where they're going down the snowy mountain to get across the border into Tangier. They have to use the case and use the cello to like keep themselves from falling over. I really liked that. That was really, and the car chase that leads up to it, like, that's cool. And the ending scene, the scene near the end where they're in the plane and there's like explosions and gunfire, and it's insane. But there doesn't seem to be really an end goal in all this. The main plot is about smuggling diamonds and raw opium, and it just reminded me of Which one was it? For Your Eyes Only, but in For Your Eyes Only there was a point to it. But like this film just it feels like it's bundling together a lot of things from other Bond films instead of having its own story. Like, oh yeah, a KGB agent makes his way into a safe house and throws explosive milk everywhere. It feels like on paper this story should work for me. And it's only really decent because, like, yeah, it's not ungodly boring. There's stuff happening. There are moments where I'm like, does this scene really need to be in the movie? Does this character really need to be here? That's how I feel about Saunders. But yeah, it's just kind of a middle of the road Bond film. Even though I gave it a 7, it's a middle of the road at best. If people love it, they're allowed to go ahead. But yeah, I really don't see anything fantastic about the film, really, other than the action, which is really well done. But yeah, get to the pros and cons. Pros: Timothy Dalton, John Rhys-Davies do great jobs. The action, again, is very well done. The score by John Barry is another step up from Octopussy. Cons, again, the Bond girl, Cara Malovi, played by Miriam Dabo, is kind of bland. She doesn't really have much in the way of character other than she's basically just being kept as by Koskov in order to, like, be used, and she thinks that he loves her when in reality he's a playboy. It's kind of bland. Again, Joran Krabe and Jodan Baker kind of wasted here as the villains. I do wish it was just one villain instead of two. We don't really need two. We need one developed villain without instead of two non-developed. Again, Saunders, played by Thomas Wheatley, is pretty annoying. And yeah, again, this is gonna be a shorter video than the other Bond reviews, but yeah, it's all right. It's a decent Bond movie. It's definitely lower than a lot of the others, but yeah, that's about all I can say about it. But if you like the review, comment down below, like the video, subscribe, and movie reviewer next door out.